Welcome to the What I Meant to Say podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, and I started these conversations because life doesn't give us do-overs. So this is a space where we get a chance to reflect and tell our story again, with more grace for ourselves, and hopefully make us all better for having listened. This week I caught up with my lifelong friend, Russell Raypon. Russ is a school psychologist, basketball coach, husband, and father of two with amazing insight on what makes a great coach-player relationship and ways to create safety for athletes and students to thrive in this social media dominant world. He has had the privilege to coach and build relationships with some NBA players that still call him to train when they are home, like Brooke Lopez of the world champion Milwaukee Bucks, and is a published author with his contribution to the book, Winning Still. Russ has a down-to-earth quality that is able to make extraordinary impact one athlete at a time. Come listen to his amazing wisdom.
All right.
All right.
You guys are up.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Love these coaching conversations, and I'm so excited to have Russell Raypon on What I Meant to Say this week, because Russell and I have been having conversations since we were 16 years old, driving to high school. And Russ has become a school psychologist, an awesome basketball coach, and he's also a dad with kids same ages or similar ages to my kids. And so they've all come up together, so it's been like a generational thing. So
Yes.
anyway, thanks for being here today, Russ. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity. Anytime that, I can jump into a conversation about coaching, about, education, leadership, all that kind of stuff. For me, it's time well spent. So I'm looking forward to, what you got for me.
All right. Well, I'm excited to break it down, but I think it's only appropriate that we start with March Madness and that final game the other night. Just give me a couple of takeaways from that, because that was a heck of a game.
I think, talking about globally, I think this has been one of the most entertaining tournaments in years. Just all the storylines. The games were so competitive, especially as you got to the Sweet 16, Elite Eight. You're looking at North Carolina and Duke playing for the first time in the Final Four. Possibly Coach K's last game. Golly, and admittedly, right? You look at Kansas, Villanova. Villanova's won it twice in the past, like 4 or 5 years. Kansas, Bill Self hasn't won since 2008.
Yep.
And, there has been controversy the past couple of years because of, the FBI investigation. I mean, there's just so many like different storylines, and, my takeaway is what Coach K said. I know I saw this quote earlier today. What you should be intending at the end of the season when you walk into the locker room, you're either crying out of sorrow or you're crying out of joy.
Yeah.
But at least if you're doing that, it means that, your team is fully invested. And, I think that's what he probably walked into that Saturday night. A bunch of players who, played their hearts out, little to no experience, like veteran leadership, and, and they left it all on the floor.
Yeah.
It's the one thing I will say about Coach K is, I haven't always been the biggest fan, but there's no way any coach can't appreciate what he's done, just in the simple fact that over like 4 decades, he has changed styles. He's found different ways to win. Veteran-laden teams, traditional offense, then moving to more, a more European, a more modern offense where everyone's skilled and, everyone's playing outside of the key. Playing in the one, coaching in the one and done era, where you're only getting guys possibly for 1 year. The transfer portal, of all those things, it can be difficult for coaches to manage and to build team chemistry, to build rapport.
Yeah.
Build and figure out what the style of play is, which will be best for that team. But he's been doing it for, doing it well for years. So, you
Yeah.
can't help but appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um,
that agility and ability to adapt is like a hallmark of a real icon for
and I
sure.
think that's a great word, agility.
Yeah.
You're the mental agility it takes to be able to function and be effective uh, in different eras of the game. I mean, it's hard to do. It's really
Yeah.
hard to do.
Yeah, that was definitely an end of an era, and that game was you could feel it. It was like you said, they left it all out there, and then to go back on the to take that quote you just said and go into the locker room knowing you left it all on the floor, with
Yeah.
that being the end. I mean, it gives me
Hmm.
chills, right? So, and everyone that was watching it knew it. So,
Yes, I mean, I don't know if there's been a more highly anticipated game in the tournament
yeah,
in years. I mean, the Tobacco Road rivalry, up,
yeah,
center stage for all of college basketball to see. That just,
yeah.
it was
Doesn't get any better.
doesn't get any better. It's like no one, you couldn't write it any better if you
And
were
see,
planning this stuff out.
and for me, that's, I mean, I don't have nearly the depth of basketball knowledge that you have, but for me, March Madness has just always been, since I was in college, just an absolute thing that I have to hook into because
Hmm.
the basketball is amazing, but the stories, you can never trump the stories that come out of that tournament. Like they're just always a good one. At least one,
Yes.
but like usually so many, like you're saying. And I'm always amazed at what comes out of that tournament on the human side.
Hmm.
And yeah, even
No,
my son Luke is actually named after Luke Walton because he was born in March, and I was watching March Madness, waiting for him to be born, and I was like, I really like that name. So even though everyone thinks they're named after the
interesting.
Gospels, I'm like, no, he really, it's a shout out to Luke Walton because I was watching Arizona basketball, and then I take it to this year and go, I usually root for Arizona because of that,
Hmm.
and but then TCU almost took down Arizona in
Yes.
another game where TCU left it all on the court. And, so I was like, first time I'm not rooting for Arizona because then that relates back to my life. So I love the way these stories, they weave in and out of our daily lives. And
There's
that,
so many connections.
yeah.
Like, uh, for me, I loved watching St. Peter's play,
Oh,
and you know, and for me, having visited Jersey City, having spent time with, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Bob Hurley Sr., who
yes,
was at St.
yes.
Anthony's,
Uh huh.
who was an alumnus of St. Peter's, and uh, that's their style of play. There's not a team I've watched that represents their community like St. Peter's. I mean, those guys are all typical, like, I'm sure Jason could attest to it. They're all typical Jersey, New York guys. They're tough, they're hard nosed, they're scrappy. And I don't know if you've seen this, but so the head coach of St. Peter's, Shaheen Holloway, he was just recently hired by Seton Hall, right?
Okay.
He brought his entire St. Peter's team to the press conference at Seton Hall, and then he thanked them publicly at the
Oh,
press conference for the job,
oh my
because of
gosh.
the way they played and because of what they did. It allowed him to
That
to
gives
go
me
back alma
chills.
mater.
Yeah.
uh, so
That's,
the people just gave him a standing ovation at the
oh,
press conference.
yeah, I'm such a huge fan of coaches that acknowledge the contributions of their athletes in a
Yeah.
in that way. I mean, it shows it's such a hallmark of a great coach and leader. And we've talked about, we watched it with Karch this summer, in when the U.S. women won the indoor gold
Right.
at the Olympics, and it's just a hallmark of a great coach that knows how to go back and thank the athletes for their contribution, right? So I hadn't
I
seen that, but that's a cool story.
you look at it this way, Wendy. Coaches need great players more than great players need coaches,
Yeah.
right? If you're talking about athletic performance, uh, maybe a great coach takes an elite athlete to another level of performance. But you can be a great coach, but if you don't have uh, the players to execute what you want, and you don't have, obviously players who have talent or can fit in your system, then you can be as great as you want, but it's not
Yeah.
going to work. So, um,
Well, I agree with you there, and then but I also what it turns around in my what dawns on me when you say that is a great coach can take a great athlete and make him a better person.
true.
And that
But
is like I love that connection, and that's all about what I'm doing like with Be Better is just how do you take that talent and hone it so that that person can take what they learned in the game, use that talent to become the best human being they can become, right? And I think that's the
yeah,
hallmark of a good coach too.
I think I I look at or sort of reflecting on what you're talking about. For in my experience, what I've seen so much, and I get probably this at the high school level, at the youth level
Mm-hmm.
mostly, is um, the illusion that uh, coaches are solely responsible for what happens to their team.
Oh,
So, you know, and then it becomes like an ego builder. Well, we're winning all these games, we've won these championships, uh, we have this notoriety or popularity. It's because it was me. I set the stage, I trained the players, I set up the system, the structure. This is why we're successful. And I think that's an illusion. I think that's a fallacy. I don't think that's necessarily the complete story.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that is for me a major challenge for coaches is understanding ego, right? Understanding what exactly your role is in the larger puzzle of how a team or how an athlete operates. It's funny, I had this conversation with my wife last week talking about moving potential to performance,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and I see it in my own kids. It's no longer a an issue of skill or talent or ability. They have the requisite, DNA for that. They have the foundation, but everything else is, up here.
Mm-hmm.
It's mental. And so we were having this, and I asked her, like, if you could identify three things that you think are essential to moving someone, she works with ballet dancers, moves them from potential talent to actually being on stage and performing at their best. And like, what did she what did she say? Technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have the skills first. You have to have the discipline,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you have to, for me, it's sort of like performing on command.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be that ability to, that's why you turn it on, but you have a process in place that allows you to put yourself mentally in a space where I step on the floor, step on the field, step on the stage, and I have a complete understanding of my skill, right? What I can do. I've had I've demonstrated discipline. I've had the reps. I know I can do these things, right? That sort of builds confidence,
Yep.
and then my mindset is to only worry about sort of like flow, right? You're just
Right.
worried about being in the moment,
Yep.
being totally aware of what's happening, and hopefully things are naturally happening because you've built a foundation.
Right. And that goes to so much of that goes to your routine before, the reps you've put
Yes.
in before, like you're saying. I mean, how do you build that confidence and go through that struggle of not being good to get to that moment where you've converted that potential to performance, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
so many athletes these days don't see that struggle. And I think I've said this to you before. Like, I have 4 kids. My youngest one has only seen his older two siblings be good at something, and he'll be like, well, I'm not good at that. Or and I want to say, and I say to him all the time, I'm like, they weren't always good. Like, you know how you were a little guy when these guys were going to practice and getting it in, and you didn't see them struggle. And I do think that there's something to being able to struggle and not be good at something, or not be as good as you want to be, and still have that discipline to put it in and not just expect to be good. And then that gets converted to performance, right?
Yeah. You know what? I think about that too. And I look at it as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I think as hopefully if you've been involved in athletics, or you coach, or you've been involved in competition, you have an understanding of the process, of what it takes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes for a lot of parents that may not have that experience, they sort of live and die on each rep. They live and die on each game. If they've lost, if a team or their child has lost a tournament, or if they didn't finish in first place. And I often think about us as, and this goes for coaches too.
Yeah.
I often think about how we as adults handle failure, right? And how that translates, how that models into the kids we work with. And I also think about, hold on a second, it's going to be an announcement.
I love it. We're in high school here.
Student, William Langford, please report to the office. William Langford to the office. Also, any middle school students who brought money for pictures, please report to the wrestling room at this time. Also, if your parents ordered online, please report to the wrestling room. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret.
I swear I had nothing to do with that.
I said high school. I forgot. It's middle school. Yeah.
It's middle school. Yeah. But so going back to my point,
yeah.
I think about why we're so afraid of failure.
Yeah.
I mean, even for me, I had those moments when I'm watching, and see, for me personally, I can't work out with my son Mateo anymore.
Okay.
Like I've already figured it out. We've come to that place where, because you know how that is when you have to have willing participation. You have to have someone that has an open mind to what you're trying to share. So there was a point where, Mateo and I, we could work out and, we can get through an entire workout and we both feel like it's productive, but he's growing, he's maturing in his own game. He's trying to understand his own game. He's worked with other coaches before. So now it's like, you can sort of see that when you talk about boundaries, the delineation between coach and parent, athlete and child, they're at a place where they're starting to get blurred too often. So then now you're looking at maybe not necessarily a lack of willingness, but a resistance to what we're trying to get done. And then at that point, the workouts aren't productive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, sort of going back to the original point, coaches really have to look at, and understand their own conception of failure and what that means to them. Because the last thing you want to do is for failure to create a situation where kids can't succeed, they can't be effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing if they're learning a new skill, they're brushing up against the limits of their potential, of their skill, and they're struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're not approaching those challenges appropriately, if we're living and dying, right, as parents and coaches on this kid just can't get it.
Yeah.
Like Bob Hurley, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about practice one time, and he told me that if we don't get the skill in 5 minutes, we move on. That means I didn't teach it well enough for these guys to understand it. I'll go home, look at what I did, revise it, and we'll hit it again tomorrow.
Okay.
Right? For me, that's like an appropriate way to handle failure. It's not necessarily on the kids, which a lot of coaches do. Sometimes even myself, we blame the kids. They just can't get it. As opposed to, well, how did I teach it? Did I teach it in a way that they were going to get it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then am I willing to accept that as a coach, that I don't know everything? I need to try something else.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be agile, right? Like Coach K. And let's try this another way.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we can all remember that one coach that told us, the one thing. I mean, Jason's an awesome coach, and only because volleyball being my sport, like I've been on the beach with him, and he'll say one thing, and I'm like, oh wow, I never like that. Those couple words that might hit with one athlete,
Yeah.
like you never know when you're going to get those, and different kids take things in differently, and even
Yes.
adults, right? We take things in differently, and so you're going to have the people that resonate with you and the coach that resonates with you, but you're going to remember that one guy that said, no, keep your elbow higher, or like, you're dropping, whatever it is. Like, and that is, it's a huge learning lesson. But I like that put in, the concept of being a responsible coach, and not pushing a player to the point of like where they're so afraid to fail that we're starting to deal with like performance anxiety and stuff like that, because
Yes.
it's huge. And one thing I've started to do, because you're talking parents, wearing that hat of parenting and coaching, and it's like,
Mm.
I haven't coached my kids since they were little. I mean, I like their skill set far surpasses anything I've ever had. But from a parenting perspective, I know like when they started out, and you that feeling of like how you feel after one game or one tournament or whatever. And then as you mature through that process as a parent, hopefully, you realize like, okay, dang, I hate that day when his heart's hurting, but you know what? He's had a lot of other days where his heart's been soaring or her heart's been soaring. So, you got to write it out. But one thing I've started doing as a parent is, especially because my kids are farther away, and they're in college,
Mm.
I don't send the text when I'm not there. I don't send the text after the game now. I send the text before. And I go out there and have a great time. If it works out for you, great. Like right now with Stanford volleyball, I'm like, dude, think where we were a year ago. We didn't even have
Yeah.
a team. Like, go out there and play your heart out. But in the end, like, next point, next ball, next game, look where we've been, And it changes it changes the mindset. It also gives the kid the opportunity to just be like, because really, I'm like, you text your kid after a game or a match that they've lost, like, you're probably not going to even hear back from them. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, they're hurting, But you get it. You get it. But you got to, as a parent, you flip the paradigm and go, okay, what can I do to support the journey rather than the result of the game? Because in the end, it's just another game, right?
You look, perspective taking
Yeah.
is huge. I think that we have to do a better job as coaches and parents, right?
Yeah.
In our own perspective taking and our, what's happening to our athletes, what's happening to our children, what's happening to our teams. And we have to do a better job of teaching kids how to understand and how to unwrap, right?
Yeah.
What happens when good things happen, how you handle that, right? And then when things that you don't want to happen, I don't want to call them bad things, but
Yeah.
when things that you don't expect,
Yep.
when they happen, it's interesting. Like, I don't know. Do you know Giannis Antetokounmpo?
No.
About the Milwaukee Bucks?
Oh, on the Bucks. Okay.
Greek
Yeah.
freak, Wendy.
Freak.
Okay. Yeah.
Greek freak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wendy.
I know. This is my basketball knowledge.
NBA
It comes
NBA
and goes.
champ.
Oh, I know the Bucks won the championship. I watched it, but I always have 10 different things going on at the same time. So I should
That's okay.
know. And last
That's all right.
basketball season, I probably did know, but yeah, my apologies.
No worries. So
Continue.
Giannis, right? He's a star player on this team. He's been with that team ever since he was 18.
Oh, wow.
He hadn't played a lot of basketball before, being drafted.
Okay.
Right. So this guy has developed into, an MVP of the league, MVP of the finals. And, every year he's added something to his game. The knock on him, even last year, was that he didn't have a perimeter shot. He couldn't shoot from the outside. All his game was based on was going to the basket, layups, dunks, and all that kind of stuff. So in a game last week, I think he hit a 3 versus the Sixers or the Nets that sent the game into overtime. And then the Bucks won in overtime.
Nice.
Right. So he goes into the press conference afterward, and they're asking him questions, and then he talks about. I didn't hear the first part, but then he explained himself. He goes, I'm always trying to stay humble. Right.
Favorite kind of athlete.
I thought he said, I'm humble. I thought he said, I am humble. He said, no, I'm always trying to stay humble. I'm trying to stay humble. I'm trying to stay hungry so that way I can be happy.
Oh,
right. When he's playing, he calls us, the 3 H's.
I like it.
Humility. So, understanding, where he is, what he can do, what he can't do. Understanding, like you said, like looking back and saying, this is where I came from. This is where I am now. And he's hungry. He's driven to be better. Like, where he is now is not the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is like the happiness. Like he has joy, or he experiences joy when he's doing what he loves. He loves to play. He loves to get better. He loves his teammates. I talked to Brooke, and Brooke says that Giannis is great. That's awesome. Is a great teammate. Giannis flew the entire team to Greece last year for, just before training camp.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then,
one of the best places I've ever been.
I've never been, but yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So,
you've never seen water like that. It's amazing.
Like blue, clear blue, right?
The best water I've ever been in.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you take that lesson, and this is the guy that's already won the championship. He's already been an MVP.
Yeah.
And he's walking into a press conference talking about trying to remain humble, not being humble, trying to remain humble.
Yeah.
And then, trying to remain hungry and trying to, as much as possible, access happiness, the joy of playing.
Absolutely.
If you're able to master those 3,
yeah.
And I think we as coaches probably have to do a better job of helping our athletes to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see it in my kids. They live and die on whether or not they can turn multiple times in a pirouette, or they're not hitting their jump shot. They've missed like 5 in a row.
So little background for the audience. Russell has a daughter who is she's 17 now. 17 and a ballerina, studying away from home, on the way to. Is she considered a professional ballerina at this point, or I'm not sure how that goes?
Pretty close. I think she's right there.
Okay. And then
probably within the next year, she'll be hired by a ballet company. And
amazing. And she moved away at 15. We'll get into that, right?
Yes.
And then his son Mateo is a basketball player. And how old's Mateo now?
Mateo will be 16 this week.
Okay. So yeah. So 2, athletes, and his wife was also a professional dancer. So
yes.
They've been raising these athletes for 17 and 16 years, and they've got stories. So
yeah, a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, Wendy. Like I couldn't identify anything that I did or that I have that's like sort of, it contributed to where they are right now and where their journey is. I just remember especially when it comes to Mateo, because, he's a basketball player. I love basketball. I've been coaching for over 20 years, I guess.
Yeah.
My only intent was for him to be around the game, just be around the game, be in the gym, dribble the ball around, be around great players, or be around older players.
I love those pictures you have of Mateo when he was tiny with Brooke and Robin.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
when they came to the kindergarten class? I still have one of Kate, and she was up to their knees, and like they're so amazing.
I remember when Robin was just drafted with the Suns.
Okay.
They had their training camp in San Diego, USD.
Uh-huh.
And because I think, Steve Kerr, the general manager at the time, I think he's based out of San Diego. So they arranged training camp there, and they had an open practice for fans to come in and watch what they were doing. So at that time on the team, they had like Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Shaq, Jason Richardson.
Uh-huh.
And so after practice, Robin came up in the stands, grabbed Mateo,
Mm-hmm.
and then he carried Mateo around, introducing him to all the players, Amari Stoudemire, all these guys. And then there was actually a photo of Mateo and Robin together on the NBA website, because sort of highlighting highlighting training camp, right? What the teams were doing.
Okay.
So I mean, like, you know, I think a lot of what we talk about and where we can have influence is access, right? Can we as parents, as coaches, provide access for our players, for our children to, one, figure out what they love to do, right?
Yeah.
Give them the opportunities to do that, to experience that. And then once they find something that they love to do, how are we able to put them in positions where they're getting enough positive experiences where it builds on itself and it sort of crescendos, and, you know, there's a momentum building for, you know, for them to follow it wherever it goes. So, you know, I couldn't tell you like how or if anything was intentional that we did, that I did.
Yeah,
but
I would say the same. I totally, that resonates because, you know, you do have people ask you like, how did you get him to this level? And so often I say, like, never in my wildest dreams did I think I ever made a decision to say, oh, I'm going to get a kid to Stanford, or I'm going to get a Division I athlete, or I'm like, it was so much. And even when they were little, whenever you have a problem or a challenge that you're dealing with, I would always take it back to the character strength. Like, what am I trying to teach this kid in this moment?
Yeah.
Right? And when you can relate things back to the character strengths and the experience rather than the outcome of like, oh, I need this kid to go to this, or I need them to be that. One, you talk about taking your ego out of it, but really, like, it is the development of the human, right? And as parents, we're looking, my number one goal is to help my kids be contributing members of society that love themselves and know how to support other people, you know. And when you make decisions from that place, like where they get, when someone asks you that question, you go, I don't even know. I took them to practice and fed them dinner. I don't know, you know. I mean, and so there is a lot to be said for that, because I think we do live in a culture today of, you know, results driven, you know, instant gratification, a lot of hours these kids are putting in, a lot of lessons, a lot of, can you get to the finish line? And then we're getting kids to the finish line and they're burnt out and they're injured and they're hurt, and mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. And man, for people like you and I who have loved the game our whole life, whatever game it is, and never burnt out, like, for the things that I would say, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth there, like, I never burnt out. Now, there are things that I go, gosh, I wish I had known these things, which are the things I love to teach now and say, like, you know, your confidence really matters. Like, how do we, you know, helping a player recognize what their gifts are. Like, I love doing that. But that's because I know it's going to feed them across the board later in life, not just in the game. So, and that's something I feel like I didn't always have. So it's, you know.
You know, you look at that and speaking as, you know, as a Filipino person of color, you know, culturally, it's very easy for, you know, in Filipino culture, you know, everything that a family member does is reflective of the family, right? So I remember when I was a kid, you know, if I got all A's or if I won this, you know, a competition, you know, one, my parents were super proud, but that would be shared with everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I remember there's this one family, I won't name the name, family, the daughter was the same age as us, right? And every time she won an academic award or whatever, it was always shared at a party. It was always like, you know, celebrated as if it was a reflection of the family, a reflection of the parents. And I think sort of what we were talking about in terms of where we find ourselves now, you know, in society, or how we view wins and losses, how we view success and failure is, you know, we're making this assumption that what kids are doing is a reflection of you being a great parent or you being a great coach.
Yeah.
I tell coaches all the time, you understand that you are basing your happiness and your sense of worth on 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds.
It's a
I mean,
tall
think about
order.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a great coach if I can get 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds to do what I want them to do and win games. Like, you're just uh, dooming yourself to like being sad and frustrated and angry like 90% of the time you're doing this job. You're as a parent, as a coach.
Yeah.
You'll never achieve a place of satisfaction, peace, self-worth if you're only looking at the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that when you're talking about, you know, when you're talking about us as parents and as coaches, we have to make the process, although hard, we have to make it fun. We have to make it, put it this way, you know, when I was growing up, when we were in high school, whatever,
Yeah.
I used to play tennis, individual
remember.
sport.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But there came a time where my mom told me, I will never watch you play again because I'm tired of watching you smash your racket into the ground. I'm tired of you making all these, whining to to yourself, making a fool out of yourself because you're not doing well. I'm just not going to watch.
Okay.
I thought to myself, wow, I had no self-awareness. I didn't know I was even doing that.
Oh, wow.
But then and I realized at that point that maybe I don't like or I don't love tennis.
Okay.
But when I found basketball when I was like 6th or 7th grade, I was terrible at it. But the aspect of team sports, but the aspect of learning something and like learning something every day, every time you're on the floor,
yeah,
discovering something new, trying something out and seeing if it works. I think that sense of discovery is the reason why, for me, I haven't lost my affinity for basketball. Sort of like I would assume, like for you in volleyball. I mean, like it keeps on giving to you, right? The sport keeps on giving to you, whether it's the sense of improvement in your skills or the ability to be in a social place with people that have similar values. I mean, all that stuff plays into it. But if we can't help our kids find that, if we can't create conditions as a coach where that can happen, right? Always a sense of discovery, always being grateful of the time and of the experience, right? Then sort of there's no place to sustain long-term growth. There's no like fertile ground where you can establish character.
Yeah.
And it just is not, it becomes a chore.
Right.
You have to do as opposed to something that you want to do and you feel compelled to do, even if you're not feeling great, even if it,
Yeah, because there's another lesson that we get from sports. I mean, how many days do you get up and there are just things that you have to do.
Right.
And I will say, I know I took that exact lesson from swim practice and volleyball practice, right? Like, I don't feel like it right now, but I got to do it. Right. And so that's where the discipline and the consistency come in. And those are the building blocks of a great life. Right. I mean, way beyond the court. But those
absolutely.
Those are the things that we take. And whether, I've watched, my third born come through and shift from volleyball to theater, but that consistency to show up when you're tired, when someone gets sick and you got to learn the other part, and then you're just exhausted that night, but you're like, okay, I'm going to go to bed and get up and do it again tomorrow. Like, that's when you grow up. That's what life looks a lot like that, right? So I'm always about those lessons that we learn when we're learning to master something and learning to enjoy the process rather than the outcome, and then you look forward and you go, man, now I look back on my life and go, gosh, those things got me through some really hard times.
Yep.
And
I think I love the word you used with regards to mastery. Yeah. I think we look at success, speaking as a coach, in wins and losses. But I tell players all the time, I tell coaches that I talk to all the time, you can have your best game plan, your kids are on it, they're executing, they're playing together, and you can still lose the game.
Yeah.
you can be at your worst. Your players are disengaged. Your best player is not cooperating,
Yeah.
right? And you can win that game still.
Yeah.
But what is more valuable? What do you, as a coach, as a person, what do you value more?
Right.
And so that, for me, mastery is like really important. Mastery is what drives you. If you want to be good at something, great at something, then there's, and this is what Gretel talks about, and when we had this discussion about moving performance, potential to performance, is there has to be a certain level of obsessiveness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yes.
master something.
And I have questioned myself. I know in my younger days, I did not have that.
Yeah, I did.
And now I do for certain things. I've always had it parenting. Like, I have always been dialed in since the second I had these kids. Like, absolutely been the first thing that I was like, wow, I am on fire for this. Like, I will give it every last thing that I've got. But I know I didn't have it younger. And then yet you see athletes, the ones that really go the distance, a lot of them, you can have it from a really young age. And based on my experience, I'm like, okay, I do think you can change over the years. I think you can mature, you can grow, you can be exposed to different things. But a lot of the ones that really, approach mastery in a specific sport, like, they've got that obsessiveness from the get-go, and
Yeah.
so
I think about Francesca, and she was dancing everywhere. Like, she'll dance at home. Like, even to this day, when she comes home and visits us,
yeah,
like, she'll be getting a snack in the kitchen, and she'll be rehearsing a piece she's working on, a solo she's working on, or she'll just dance her way into the kitchen and dance her way out.
that is so
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Who does that?
Yeah, somebody who's on fire for what they're doing. And like, when I say, she was born with that, because if she wasn't, with the pace she's going, I mean, that's where you see the burnout. But look at her. Like, that's such a beautiful thing to see, because that's coming from inside of her. That's not coming from, I mean, you can't, I am convinced, I could be wrong, but my opinion is you cannot crack the whip hard enough to get that.
No.
You know what I mean?
Not at all. I mean, and isn't that what we want for all our kids?
Yeah.
Whether you're a coach or a parent,
Yeah.
you want them to feel enriched by what they're doing. You want it to become a part of them. Like, I hear this often, right? Like, I hear from athletes or coaches, I coach, but that's not who I am, right? Or I am an athlete, but that's not who I am. And for me, I look at it differently.
Okay.
Like, a real coach is a coach everywhere, right? In their life. I mean, and not to say they're telling people what to do, or they're giving their advice, or they have all these pearls of wisdom that they're sharing with everybody. But, I look at it this way, Lenny, like, you look at the society, how many professions are also the names of what they do, right? So coach, father, doctor. I mean, like, you call someone doc, right? Is it a complete description of who they are as a person or what they do? Priest, father, like, when you call someone father, that this is what they've dedicated their life. For me, coach is the same thing. Only certain people get to be called coach.
Yeah.
So it's something that you should value. And I don't know where I was going with this.
Well, maybe just to respect the title, and not to say that, like, you don't step off the court and become something different, but you carry that through your life. I mean, I definitely see that in you.
Well, I don't know if I did that intentionally, but that's what I think for me, that's what I intended for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to find something that's something positive for sure, but something that becomes them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it, not that I want them to be identified as a ballet dancer, or a ballerina, or like as a basketball player, but something that really does, they find it's a part of who they are. They can't separate themselves from it, because those kinds of things, if you find them, regardless of what age you are, right, those things no one can take away from you.
No. And
Like,
allowing them to be a part of your identity. And also just, I think the reason I'm so passionate about connecting with the next generation is because I love to help them find that potential within themselves, right?
yeah,
And connect it to whatever it is their special, what is their talent, right?
right.
And
No, absolutely.
and if you can inspire that, and you can help a kid unlock what's inside of them, because it's already there, right? It's just, you're just helping them see it. And that, to me, I mean, that's where the growth comes in a junior athlete or dancer or performer, that it elevates their entire consciousness. It changes the way they carry themselves in the world. It changes the way
Absolutely.
they treat other people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, going, like, confidence that they have to be themselves. That
Yes.
self-awareness, I mean, and that's what I'm all about teaching.
It's for me, self-discovery, self-awareness are sort of along the same path,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I think about sort of all the discussions we've ever had regarding these topics. If I were to nail down something that is a concept that's under taught, right, or under shared, it's self-awareness. I think
Amen.
that if there's any skill that young people need, especially now, is self-awareness. I'm on I'm on school campuses, and hearing stories about cyberbullying, or the power that something you text to somebody has on somebody else.
Yep.
At some level, there is a lack of self-awareness. There is only how I feel, there's only what I think, and I have the right to share that regardless of how that makes you feel,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that, for me, that describes someone who's not self-aware, not understanding that they have a role, or they have an impact on the people and the places and the environments and communities around them. I think that's sort of the special thing about sports, whether team sports especially, is that it's a microcosm, right? It's the petri dish where if you're thinking of it this way, you can teach kids how to be self-aware.
Yes.
Because like my preparation, or like we have a game coming up tomorrow, if I don't get enough rest as a player, if I don't eat well, if I didn't study the game plan, and I walk on that floor the next day and we don't perform well, I have to be able to understand that because I didn't do A, B, and C, it resulted in us not being our best. We didn't perform, right? Even though we had the potential to perform. So, self-awareness is big.
Yeah.
It's, and not only just for knowing yourself, but because by nature, unless you're a total recluse, right? You're
Yeah. We're all connected.
secluded.
Yeah.
You're connected. Exactly. Everyone's connected.
Yeah.
What I do impacts you. What someone else does impacts me. We cannot, and especially now, the level of separation is almost zero. Everyone is so interconnected.
Yeah. All the time. All the time. I was just
there's no rest. Yes.
There's no rest. We're all connected. And if you notice, like, one of the worst things we can do if we're feeling down is to go, and I've told my kids this, go on social media and start scrolling when your mind isn't right. Like, you will feel terrible. And you think about the access these kids have 24/7. Like, I told my son a story about me being bullied when I was in junior high, because my hat's off to you, Russ, because I'm pretty sure that junior high is something that needs to be survived.
Yes.
And it's junior high is tough. In my opinion, toughest thing that kids come through. In my life, schooling wise, absolutely. But I was bullied in, 7th grade, and I'm passing the story on to my own son the other day, and I said, but I remember walking into my home, closing the door, going to my room, closing the door, and feeling solace and safe, and like Nobody's getting to me right now. I'm going to decompress. I'm good. Kids don't have that. You literally, as the parent, have to take the phone, turn off the computer. Like, they do not have a break from what's coming at them unless they have the discipline to turn it off. And they don't have the discipline to turn it off because these things have been in their hands, and that social media has been in their consciousness since they can remember. Yeah. So it's a scary, where you are as a school psychologist. Like, it's scary to me as a parent.
You look at what you're talking about, Wendy, and when we often have students who are struggling with anxiety or any number of social emotional issues. Mm-hmm. One of the things we often talk about, and I didn't learn this until maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, mm-hmm. was the concept of like safe people and safe spaces, right? So we ask kids, is there a safe person here, right? If it's not, if you can't contact your mom, you can't, and if we're not considering friends as safe people, talking about safe adults, who would you talk to if, you were struggling, if you weren't feeling good? And then what's a safe place you can go to? What's a place where you can go to where you can raise your hand, ask the teacher, and they will allow you some time to take a break in a safe place. Mm-hmm. So we ask the kids to identify those things, mm-hmm. but I think that sort of speaks to what you're talking about is, there's no more safe spaces are now becoming more rare.
Yeah.
There are no more safe spaces. And to be honest, because of the anonymity in a way, or the lack of accountability in technology, there are no safe people sometimes.
Right.
So so kids are now walking into social situations, especially after COVID.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, huge. So
they haven't been practicing real social skills in 2 years, right? All their social connection has been predicated on access to technology. But even in that, you can't tell what people are saying is actually true, if it's meant to prop you up, or really it's meant to talk down to you.
Yes.
And then, there's no real safe space in technology, unless maybe you're playing, you're playing a game on your phone, mm-hmm. not a game that's like, that's interconnected, but you're playing like, solitaire or something, right?
Or like
other than that, there's no safe.
It's what Jason's doing right now.
Oh, there you go, right?
As he listens to you.
Of course.
That's crazy.
Look at Jay.
Nice.
I can't believe this.
Hey, I have this phone. What is this? Royal Match? You ever heard of Royal Match?
They connect.
Yes.
Yes. I am addicted to this thing. Now I have a competition with my wife about how many, in terms of levels, where she's at. I'm still 100 levels behind her, so I have some catching up to do.
Dude, let's not give our kids something else to get hooked on. But you're right. Oh my God, he's right.
At least you're describing the games as safe space, right? So
yeah, and you look at sports, and you look at teams, you look at the coach-player relationship. You want to create a safe place for kids to be able to operate.
Yes.
You want to create safe relationships between players and coaches. Athletes and coaches, so that real growth can happen.
Hi, we're saying hi to Jason's daughter and her friend.
Hello.
Yes.
What's up? How you doing?
Have a good time, guys.
Cute.
Yeah.
I can hear the voice.
She's a
Very
little
cute.
one. Yeah. How old is she, Jay? 5?
5.
Yeah.
She looks like.
Oh, I remember that age.
Yeah.
I remember that age.
So going back to safe space, that coach, and you're right. You're hitting on something that I also am passionate about, is that creating that safe space between coach and athlete, to take in not just the game and the learning process, but take in the world sometimes too, right?
I mean, for me, that relationship is so hard to build, but so easy to destroy. Just like, it's, sometimes what a coach tells you can be devastating, especially if the coach isn't really measuring how the message is being delivered, right? Or the timing of what they're saying. Like, sort of like when you're talking about, texting your kids before the game as opposed to afterward.
Yeah.
I talked with the kids Francesca and Matteo, we talk all about the time about reading the room.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Especially when like you're, especially, you're in situations where you're working with people all the time as a ballerina in a ballet company, on a team as a player, you have to be good at reading where your teammates are, reading whether or not they need a encouraging word, reading whether or not they need to be held accountable, reading whether or not they need to be directed, or reading whether or not you need to collaborate.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
You're talking about like really building that empathic connection, right? I mean,
Matteo played last year, and I'll mention it because this is, there's not a secret for me. Matteo was at Memorial last year, right?
Okay, that's where Russ and I went to high school.
Yeah, he played at our alma mater last year as a freshman, right, on the JV team.
Okay.
And, Matteo would come home frustrated, not because he wasn't playing or he didn't play well, but because he actually told me this, Wendy. He said he felt like he was a team therapist.
Oh, that's
exhausting. He was even the team therapist for the coach.
Oh, that's exhausting. And not
he told the coach, you can't get what's the word now? You can't get thrown out of the game because the team needs you.
You're reminding me of Hoosiers, Russ.
I mean, that's a 14, 15-year-old telling a grown man that he's got to keep it together because his team is depending on him.
Yeah.
Right. And all these kids are coming up to him when they're not playing. And like, Matteo's sitting there, man, like, your playing time is affecting my playing time, but you don't hear me complaining to you. I'm trying to make you feel better about like, hey, don't worry about it. You'll go back in. You get another chance.
Yeah.
But that's a big time skill or ability to develop. Reading the room, like, who am I with?
Yeah.
Right, who am I with? Who are the in a sense the main players, like, who am I working with? What's how do they like to communicate?
Yeah.
What helps them to be their best? Because I think one of the things I also talk about with coaches is what is your main intent? To demonstrate your anger that they're not doing something or they're doing it wrong, or helping them to do it right.
Yeah.
And it might not be because you said something. It might be someone else telling the athlete or the team. It might not be blasting them in the locker room post game. It might be the next day when you're able to process it, and now we can have a constructive practice based off of what we didn't do well. We didn't work on, we did poorly in the rebounding, sharing the ball. We're going to focus today, this practice, on working on those things.
Yeah, and I mean, you're getting at like why it's so important for a coach to be mindful and teach that to their players, right? Because you're getting at the heart of not reacting and taking the time to respond. Like, take things in, give them time to integrate, and come back with a proper response rather than getting thrown out of the game because you're mad, right? I mean,
you look at that, and there are absolutely times in life and in sports where we are required to make snap judgments. We are required to react in the moment, good or bad, or not understanding what the result may or may not be.
Yeah.
But you're forced to read the situation quickly and make a decision and then follow through on it. One of the things that I think, along with like the self-awareness piece, it sort of ties into it. It's sort of, I read this in a book, Upstream, right? I think by Dan Heath. He talks about problem blindness. One of the things he mentions in terms of problem solving, one of the challenges in problem solving is like if you're not able to correctly identify what the problem is. So you're looking at, especially in situations in athletics where it often is group problem solving, like we all got to come together and figure out what's going on. If you can identify the problem correctly, whatever solution you come up with is, will be ineffective. It's sort of like, a couple guys in a river. It's in the book Upstream. They're fishing by the river, and all of a sudden they see a kid, floating downstream. One guy jumps in, saves the child. They look up, another child is going downstream. The other guy jumps in, and before you know it, like the entire river is full of kids, and they just can't get to all the kids. So one of the gentlemen gets up out of the river and starts to walk up upstream, and the guy, hey, but what are you doing? There's all these kids in the water. His thing is, well, I'm going to go check out what's happening upstream, which is leading to all these kids being in the river. Yeah. And that's root cause.
You got to look at root cause.
Root cause, and you have to, being proactive, right? Which I think sort of comes with discipline, repetition, planning, right? Self-awareness all plays into that. Right? Because I want to be able to correctly identify what's happening to me as a player, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, social, emotional, whether it's skill-based, and where am I in each of those areas? So that way I have a clear understanding of what I'm bringing to a competition, what I'm bringing to practice, to my team. That way, when we look at and we self-evaluate after, post-game, post-practice, I can look at myself, okay, I did these things well, these things I struggled in, and how do I relate that to, like, where was I when I walked into the gym?
Yeah.
And for me, that's super important in life. I mean, if we're not asking the right questions, if we're not identifying what's really happening inside us, around us, then whatever collaboration or solution we come up with, it'll always miss the mark. And I think
and what you're describing, one of my favorite quotes is coming to mind, which is I don't know if you know who Chip Conley is. He's more of an entrepreneur, but he's written some really good books about kind of coming through life and really mastering middle age and that type of thing. I mean, he's come through a ton of businesses, and I can't really, but his quote is, wisdom is pattern recognition.
Ooh.
Right?
Wow, I like that.
So if you did...
That's really good.
Isn't it? It's like so sweet and to the point, but all the stuff you just described, if you don't have a routine, if you don't have the things that you're building into one practice or one season, you can't look back and see the pattern, right? I mean, so that could be applied to sports. It's also, applied to life. Like what are our patterns? And which patterns do we need to improve upon? Which ones are serving us? Which ones are not?
Right.
But if you don't have any self-awareness and you're not willing to look at the patterns, you don't get any wiser. And so, like, that one, it rings true for me all the time. So
I love how it's like conceptualized, because you look at where, at least for me as a high school coach, looking where our kids really struggle is, figuring out whether or not, well, a couple things. And what I'm doing, right? Does it have bearing on anybody else but myself? Mm-hmm. And if something is happening that's not working, why is it not working? I think coaches do this too. We assign blame, we assign failure on things other than ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's easy to blame your 15-year-old team on not understanding a concept because they just can't understand it, as opposed to, like, okay, I mean, what are the patterns in how they're operating? Like, how do they come to practice? Are they focused? Have they eaten? Talking about the, are some of our kids struggling academically?
Yeah.
They're bringing that to practice.
They're all stressors, right?
They're all stressors.
Yeah, which is
and
going
that's
to shut down their learning
cognition.
process. Exactly. It's so true. So the other thing I want to, before we could go for hours, Russ, but I want to talk.
How long have you been going so far?
I don't know. We're good, but
okay.
I want to bring your writing. I want to bring your writing into this, because the other place we've connected and is, you're a beautiful writer. So a lot of these concepts that we've been talking about for the last hour, that you've lived as a coach, you've also written in some amazing blogs, and I know you're housing those somewhere new these days, and I we'll put that in the show notes to have people go read some of them. But I have a couple.
Thank you.
I have a couple quotes of, like, I read through, and one of my favorite ones was, our mission as coaches is to serve the greater good of our players, not our own selfish ego. And that goes back to, what we were discussing in the beginning, and, some of those situations that you've been in as a coach. But I also, I was going through these, and I feel like we've already covered that. So, but the other one that I love is, when one player or a group within the team are treated with different rules than the rest of the players, coach-player trust is broken, and the team will fracture in pressure moments that require team unity. Do you remember what you were, a situation that you've been in where, a lot of times these days we can have, like that, to me, that's the player with all of the talent, right? That maybe the team feels they can't win without, but maybe there's a character issue going on, right? Mm-hmm. As the coach, do you make the difficult decision to try to address character issues at the same time you're dealing with the star player? Do you treat that star player the same as you would the kid who's riding the bench if they got into trouble? Right. And I think on a high school, like juniors and high school level, that comes in huge before they take the stage, especially with a talented player, because the eyes are on the talented player, right? So how do you as a coach address those types of situations?
I've seen both decisions made. I've seen a coach willing to overlook a player's misbehavior or errors in judgment only because we have a big game. Mm-hmm. And I've also seen a coach and worked with a coach that or coaches that understand that kind of differentiation, right, just purely on talent erodes what the team can be. It diminishes for sure the potential of what you can do. Mm-hmm. We sort of deal with this a lot when we talk about at least here in school setting, the difference between socially maladjusted kids, mm-hmm. right, and emotionally disturbed kids, right? So an emotionally disturbed or emotionally challenged student wants to do the right thing, right? Yeah. But is unable to make the right choice. But they're remorseful, right? Mm-hmm. They know that they're, at some level, they understand that their behavior is impacting somebody else. Uh-huh. And they don't want people to get hurt. When you look at the socially maladjusted mm-hmm. child, no incentive works for them. They're only operating on their own self-interest, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And consequences don't matter.
Interesting.
Right?
So so you're coming back to being able to have that awareness of seeing what the cause is.
Yeah. So when you look at us as coaches how we create the systems and structures for our teams, for me, I believe in, rules are tough. Mm-hmm. Rules are necessary at some level,
Yeah.
But I think I love how Coach K did it. Coach K with the original Redeem team in 2008, he brought all the guys together and he asked them to come up with their own expectations. So it was group problem solving, and he asked them to come up with things they would expect their teammates, how they expect their teammates to behave, being on time, getting extra shots and whatever they were. But that was the expectation. So it wasn't necessarily the coach actually it was the players coming up with the expectation, but the coaches enforcing what they developed. When it comes to kids, at the high school level, I often think about how, especially for the kid that has a lot of ability, coaches can run into creating transactional relationships with players, with athletes. So, I benefit as a coach from your play, right? You benefit as a player from my ability to put you in the game and give you exposure. So we're just going to mutually agree that I'm doing this for myself, but it also benefits you too, right?
Yes.
Then it becomes very easy to turn a blind eye to expectations if all you're really worried about is the bottom line. You're looking at outcome or output versus outcome, right? You're looking at product versus process, and that's a dangerous place to be. That's not the kind of relationships we should be modeling for kids, that we're just going to that people just serve utility right in our lives.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be valuing people for who they are and as people, as human beings. We will in turn assign value on what you can, how I can benefit from you.
Yeah.
And so
dangerous.
I think about, that tends to be more socially maladjusted as opposed to the other, where you're trying to fit in, but there's just, you might not have the skill to do it, or there's something socially emotionally that's challenging you.
Yeah.
And coaches need, that becomes very manipulative on both sides.
Yeah. And it's funny because now you're getting back into that. The mission as coaches is to serve the greater good of our players, not our selfish ego. That other quote that I read of yours, like that, you're feeding back into that, because that is exactly what you're talking about. And the transactional does become manipulative and way less human, way less not connected. Right.
I have no problem as a coach taking an L if it meant that in the long run the team would function better. I had no problem taking an L and not having a player play if it emphasized to that player the importance of being a good teammate, or being on time, or treating your teammates well. It comes back to that self-awareness thing.
Yeah.
It is not, when I think about kids that are like socially maladjusted, it's about them. It's never just about you.
Yeah.
Coaches are like that too sometimes. Like, it's not about you. It's not about your win-loss record. I've been coaching mostly as an associate head coach, assistant coach for over 20 years. Like, I don't remember the wins. I don't remember the losses. I couldn't tell you what the overall record is. I have no clue.
Yeah.
I don't remember game winning plays. I don't remember game losing plays. That's like you couldn't, maybe it's just my bad memory, but I don't remember any of that stuff.
No, I think that's where you and I connect too, is like it's that underlying those character issues, the stories behind the game, the players you've coached and you've been with, and you remember, their story versus and I mean, I love the buzzer beater stories and the, last minute wins and all of that, but I'm with you. Like, I'll give my hats off to Jason, because he can take me back to some memories where he can break down a game and say, don't you remember? And then I'm like, oh, I do remember that. Like, but that's never been my thing either. It's like the bigger picture, the backstory, the character of the player, or the, going to your 3 H's, those types of things. Those are the things that stick with me.
Yeah. And, and not to devalue an ability for a coach to do that. I think on every staff, or every athlete should have some measure of that, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of understanding the mechanics and the analysis of the game itself.
Yes.
Good coaches have to be able to do that. But I think,
sure.
We just, you know how it is, Wendy, like if you pass a fingerprint and a background check, anyone can be a coach.
Yeah.
Really. And then there's not even a lot of safe sport practices in most sports. I mean, they're just developing these mechanisms now, like in gymnastics, USA basketball. In order to be a certified coach, a licensed coach, you have to go through not only the background check and the fingerprinting, but you have to go through a several hour course on coaching practices, on mandated reporting, all that kind of stuff. But what if we're talking about a role that can be so important in kids' lives, how much value do we place on developing these coaches to be ethical, knowledgeable, right? And empathic enough to work with kids. Even if you look at like a teacher, right, that's just getting an extra stipend to coach, how much experience do they have working in that setting with kids? Teaching is coaching, right? Coaching is teaching, but there is there are methods that move across disciplines,
right?
But there's also there's something additional because it's a physical activity and you're working with kids that you have to be aware of, and the learning's different, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
The learning's a little bit different. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
I think just getting back to the way that coaching over 20 years and the way that some of the things you're starting to write about, I can see the hats that you wear, between the school psychologist and the parent and the coach. And so that's why I've really enjoyed, the blogs that you sent me, and then I, reading through them. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was your Winning Still book and the story behind that, because that's some more amazing writing, and that came out of COVID. So I wanted to give you a chance to tell that story too, because it's
awesome.
A cool one.
Well, I think and it's sort of like my essay in the book, right? Nothing happens by accident.
Yes.
Right? There's no luck. But sort of the context of how it all came together, COVID was just becoming a global problem, like in December, January 2019. At that point in my life, I had actually just been diagnosed with anxiety and depression.
Okay.
So I was like, it was sort of like multiple things hitting me. And then we went into lockdown. We went into shelter in place. And, for me, there was a benefit for, in terms of the pandemic and the lockdown, because it forced me to really look at myself where I hadn't had any time to do that before. I was forced to, you're in isolation.
Yeah. Forced introspection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're only left with your thoughts, right? And you need space, right? Mateo has his own space, Grethel, Francesca can't be together all day.
Right.
So there's a lot of time where you're just sort of left like with these thoughts, and you need to find a way to make sense of it. And you also need to find a way to create connection. So what ended up happening was I decided that I'm going to work on, I'm going to try to figure these things out in my head, but I'm also going to, as much as possible, do professional learning in basketball. I'm just going to sort of dive in. I have some time. The season's over. I'm just try to see if I can come up with some new ideas, be inspired. So I chatted with a coaching colleague in the Philippines, and I asked her, hey, is your staff learning anything new? What are you guys doing to sort of around professional learning amongst the staff? He said, well, I'm actually involved or participating in these Zoom meetings, and they happen Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, it's actually athletic. It's people in sports and athletics, athletic directors, coaches, Olympic athletes, grassroots athletes, those kinds of things. And we just, there's a topic every session. And, we break out into small breakout groups, and we discuss different questions. We sort of dive deeper into the concepts. So he invited me to meet the facilitator, and he explained the story. I had a chance to present at one point. I had a chance to sort of react to a topic on sports psychology by one of the leading sports psychologists in the Philippines. And basically from that small group, it ballooned into like over an 8-week period. There was like 100 people a session meeting.
So
right?
Cool.
And it was global. Like coaches here in the States, athletes in the Philippines, across Asia, across Europe. So after that,
creating connection
right?
Yeah, I love it.
And I gotta tell you, that those Monday, Wednesday forums, it was a godsend. I'm not gonna say, I'm not being dramatic and say it saved my life, but it was something when there was nothing to look forward to. That those sessions in the mornings, right?
Yeah.
7 o'clock in the evening, 10 o'clock there, that I carved out time. I made sure that I was doing nothing. And, for those 3 hours, I was invested.
So cool.
But out of the people that had participated in those forums, there was a thought to write a book about the pandemic and how athletes and people in sports dealt with it. I was fortunate they chose me along with Olympic gold medal winners, and like I said, all these amazing coaches and athletes. So we wrote a book about our thoughts and reflections on the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that was, golly, a year ago. So the book's been out for a year.
Yeah.
It's being sold in the Philippines, but from that actually led to the blog. That led to I reconnected with writing again, and so I felt like I couldn't have stopped this, like writing things down about how I was feeling. It was sort of like journaling, I guess.
Absolutely.
In a longer form.
Yes.
Like I was journaling for an audience in my own mind.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's turned into a thing where if people want to take a look at it, they can sort of see some. And it's not X's and O's. It's not technical stuff. For me, it's sort of like what we talk about, Wendy, like big ideas or more global ideas when it comes to coaching. I think, there's not a place necessarily nowadays, or it's not a premium to engage in a coaching mentee relationship. I don't think that really exists anymore. Mm-hmm. So I figured with this, with the writing, with the book, that it would be a place where people can go if they want to be mentored. Absolutely. Not by me, but sort of like group mentoring.
Right,
and
the way the book came out, it's story by story. So they're going to get your essay, but it's across sports, it's across professions, whether it's coming from an athlete or a coach. It's it's a really cool book, and I know you said it's available in the Philippines, but is it available in America?
They are planning, I think, at this point to find a way to have it distributed through Amazon.
Okay,
so hopefully
cool.
It'll be available in the States.
Well, I would love to sell it. I'd love to sell it on my website, so maybe we can hook that up because it's really good. It's really good.
Once they make the announcement, I'll definitely let you know.
Okay. It's a great book. But it's called
thank you.
It's called Winning Still.
Yes. Essays from the pandemic, something like that.
Yeah,
that's like
yeah.
that. Yeah. But yeah, and talking about the writing piece, I had geared it for coaches, but now it's sort of evolved. I think just in my own, sort of sparked by our conversations too, and conversations with my wife. I've started figure out that maybe this can also be for athletes.
Yeah. Well, and you were saying that like a lot of the time you were writing from kind of a coach's perspective, and then you were saying you've crossed over to writing sometimes now from more of a parent's perspective, right? And trying to flipping back and forth naturally, and there's value in both of those perspectives, right? So how do you bridge that, within the context of a blog? I do that all the time too, and it's like it's fun to tell these stories like through our own life experience, rather than, yes, the technical skills and all of those things are important, but I do think that there's something in the way that we're wired and always have been to learn through story, but also just the way the world is now, we need things that grab our attention, and it's like harder and harder to grab attention. And I do still think that the power of a good story is something that solidifies in your brain and stays with you. And so, that's why what I love about these conversations, the podcast forums, the blogs, like you find ones that you love and you stick with them, and there's stories that you connect with and realize that everything's not random and that there's so much universal truth running through all of these relationships and stories that we all feel more connected, whether we're, across the world from each other or sitting in the same room. And, that's what I really love about telling stories. And so I'm realizing that more and more the things that I do, I'm like, gosh, I just love, now people will know more about your story because you're sitting there in Fresno, connecting one by one by one. And you and I could be doing this at Starbucks like we always have. Right. But like there's more impact, right? How do you make impact with these stories? And so.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, Wendy, like there is a self-serving aspect to all of this. Like I do it. I mean, I'm writing because like I feel like I need to write. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Oh,
like,
absolutely. I know.
I don't anticipate, to be honest, I don't anticipate people, actually going through the effort of finding it and reading it. Mm-hmm. Like for me, it's just a function of maybe all the experiences that I've had, or all the thoughts that I've had. Like I want to put it down somewhere where, where maybe I can find it someday. Maybe Francesca and Matteo will be able to appreciate later on. I mean, that's
exactly why I started my blog. I was like, I don't care if anyone ever reads this. I know that someday when my kid is 40 years old, they're going to know what their mom was thinking when she went through this. And I wish that I had that from somebody in an older generation in my family. And when I couldn't find it, I was like, well, what's the next thing you do? You make one for yourself so that your kids will have it. And so I totally relate to that sentiment. I mean, and it does take, and I know you well enough, like I've struggled with this, but it takes the ego out of it. It helps you. I had a hard time at first writing and saying, I'm going to put this in a blog because it felt like I needed attention, right? And I struggled with that. But when you connect it to that larger purpose of just communicating with your kids, and also the massive exercise in self-awareness that journaling is, right? So you really are dealing with the core issue of journaling being one of the greatest ways that you can connect back to yourself and learn through the process. And it's so self-reflective that you can't come out of it not a little bit more self-aware. It just takes, and I tell people, like, you don't have to write a blog. It can be, 7-8 minutes a day of just like a little takeaway. You know what I mean? If you're just looking to get started. But I am such a huge believer in the power of journaling to create self-awareness.
For me, it's like, it's as simple as jotting down ideas. So like, and then coming back to them later.
For sure. That's how I write my blog every week. Yeah, by Friday, I'm like, okay, yep, I see it. All right, that's how it goes. But it's like notes on my phone, the notepad by my bedside table. You woke up, you're like, okay, that goes there. And then by the end of the week, I'm like, oh, I see it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's cool.
And for me, it's been a very, it's been a very worthwhile exercise. I mean, just the exercise of writing itself. I mean, the blog is one thing, the book is another, but like this, the exercise of putting it down on, or writing it on or typing it out, and then sort of seeing if that's really how you think. Is that really what you're, is that really the conclusion you're coming to? Is that really the knowledge you're gaining from a situation? Man, it's been, especially nowadays, because I've told you, right, that Matteo and I are moving to the Philippines.
Oh, yes. I mean, yeah. So, getting into cultural experiences here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and to be honest, I'll tell you right now that I've officially announced it to today, this morning. Oh my
goodness.
Yeah. So you're just sort of catching me in this weird place. But like, I especially now that there's so many transitions that are happening.
Yeah.
You know, the writing and the self-reflection, the self-awareness has been super helpful. I mean, I don't, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's.
Well, you don't make a decision like that lightly, so I can imagine I mean, that's a big decision to up and move to the Philippines with your son. And if you
Yes.
want to, I'd love to know, know a little on the background of why you're going to leave America and move to the Philippines.
Okay. So we talk a lot about our kids' experiences, right? We talk about having our kids have positive experiences. So a lot of what we've decided when it comes to Mateo is, and I don't know if every parent would make this decision. I know that my parents being, first generation Filipinos, first generation immigrants, they've had a hard time trying to make sense of it. But, Mateo has not had a great school experience. It's been tough, bullying, the social isolation. There's been stuff that's really, had a challenging impact on him. And so when Gretel and I talked about what we needed to do to help and support him, it became a possibility that what if he went to the Philippines and finished high school there? What if he was in a place where, he loves basketball. Basketball is a national pastime in the Philippines. He'll be completely immersed, sort of like how people view baseball or football here in the States. I mean, basketball is a part of the living fabric of daily life. And what if Mateo had a chance to experience that? What if he had a chance to create connections with people that shared his same interests?
Yeah.
I feel, we all feel like it's sort of a growth opportunity for him. And one of the things that became important, at least for me, because I'm also going through this transition, is I didn't want Mateo to feel like he had never had a chance to take a risk. So often we talk about, kids being ill prepared for when success or failure happens, right? When they become adults. I wanted Mateo to be in a place where we can make a decision as a family. And if this is what he wants to do, we will go with him through the journey. We'll go through the journey with him. But and I think we were all under the frame of thought that it may work or it may not, right? It's a big risk, but I wanted Mateo to be able to have experience with risk taking, with handling success, with handling when things don't go his way. I didn't want him to be like years old, never having taken a risk, never having to handle big moments in life. I didn't want him ill prepared.
Yeah, you're giving him a safe place to land. You're giving him the guidance through that risk at an age where he still has a safe place to land, which is huge.
Safe spaces,
yes.
Safe spaces, yes. Safe people. And I want him to, I want him to know that like there's someone's going along the journey with him. It's not just him by himself and, he has to navigate on his own.
Yeah.
It's sort of like what happened with Francesca. You're in a place now that this is the path you've chosen for yourself. We're behind you 100%. You're so fortunate that, your mother has gone through this experience and can offer support to you. And Mateo is sort of in the same type of place.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, that's sort of the essence of why he's making the move and sort of, what we hope he learns from it.
So he'll do 3 years of high school or 2 years of high school.
He'll finish junior, senior year. Yeah. And then the hope is that he'll attend college there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe he plays basketball, maybe not, that's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
But my goodness, the growth and learning you're gonna experience being in another country, learning about his background, the people he's gonna meet, the experiences he's gonna have. I mean,
amazing.
I think that it's probably worth the effort, and we're both excited for it.
Really cool, Russ.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to come see you before you take off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. the planned move is in July, so hopefully we get a chance to see each other before then.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's amazing. And for you to have the presence of mind and the commitment as a father to do that, like, my hat's off to you, because that's a big life change. But I'm sure both of you will, like you said, your outlook and your perspective on it is already, I can see. I mean, my gut is really good. That's a really cool decision to be able to make with your son. So,
and I just got to tell you, Wendy, I'm super happy for you in terms of, because I know this has all been a transition for you as well.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. And I just want to like commend you. This is, I can feel the energy in terms of your intent and where you want to go and how you want to help people. We need more people like that in the world, thinking like that, thinking like how you think. So I'm just impressed with all the things that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all grows.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that. I wrote last weekend about the concept of be better. And I had this conversation with Matthew, and he said, "Mom, that sounds kind of harsh." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Walk with me on this, and we kept talking, and I said, the reason I say be better is because for so long, everything felt like I was doing this, doing that, trying to, get your chin over the bar. And life felt like that for so long for me. There was a proving, there was maybe a lack of self-worth, or like not really knowing myself and my gifts. And what helped me come out of that place was just being present, and then learning to make the next right decision and seeing where that leads, and then wrestling with what comes up. And I think that is the process of being instead of doing. And so I explained that to him. I'm like, no, it's about being in the moment and then doing the next right thing, and not getting so bogged down in what's the big picture. And so what's come out of it, sometimes it feels really overwhelming, and sometimes I feel like, I'm grasping at straws. But these conversations, like whether it's with people I've just met, or relationships like yours and mine that we've had for a lifetime, they're so impactful. And this is my jam. Like, I love connecting with people, whether I'm writing stories about them or talking to them. And I do think the world is ready for it. So I thank you for saying that, because you do know my internal battle, and I've never been the loudest one in the room. I've never been the one that wants to stand up and get attention. And it's cool to hear you say that, because we go back a long way. So thank you.
This is awesome. This is what you're doing is like, I think that there was a space for it.
Thanks.
And
thanks.
I know that great things are going to come out of it.
Thank you. Well, I think I want to go to, kind of the reasoning behind the title for my podcast, which is What I Meant to Say, is to give people a chance to reflect and look back on, how they got to where they got, and maybe what are the things you've learned along the way. So if there is a What I Meant to Say, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind on when you get to this point, what if you look back on something, is there something you would have done differently, or advice to your younger self that you would give? Because hindsight's 20/20, but we don't get do-overs. So
that's a good question. Let me give you two.
Okay.
That's okay.
Of course.
I think one of the things. Oh, here we go. That's another announcement. Hold on.
We've been going for a while.
Isaac Nelson, please report to the office. Isaac Nelson to the office.
Isaac, I hope he's not in trouble.
I hear the bell. It's almost like the answer. It's just like an impromptu to the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Right. One, I think, through this whole process, I just realized that I'm high strung. You probably knew that, knowing me from over 30 years ago, but it never dawned on me that I was high strung.
Oh, that's
Is that crazy?
That's so great, Russ. I can't even
Right?
tell you.
I
So
mean, like,
great.
and people that know me, and obviously you're probably thinking to yourself, what the hell? Like, he didn't figure this shit out, like, a while back. But
Yeah.
no, it it just hit me 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. I love
Well,
this.
it was like, to be honest, it was in a therapy session,
Yeah.
and I was just rambling, and then it's dawning. Holy shit! Like, I'm just high strung.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and so for me, one of the things that I have learned is to one, be more understanding. Like, it's been great to identify sort of what is the thing that's happening in my head, but now it's come to, okay, so just understand it. It doesn't, being high strung doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you see things through a certain lens, and you have to be conscious and have intention with regards to how you react and how you handle things. You can either choose to make it a part of you, or you can choose to say, I'm not making that. No, I'm not taking on other people's shit. I'm just it's all about, I'm going to reframe it. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is like giving yourself permission to forgive yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to say, okay, that wasn't a great choice. Whether it's a relationship that went sour, whether it's, how you treated someone, there is a place where, some things can't be fixed, right? Yeah. Some things are unfixable,
right?
But if we allow ourselves to make that, or allow that obstacle to remain there, then for me, it's like being high strung becomes worse.
Yeah. Well, that bitterness develops, right? And it's like the forgiveness is a part of moving forward. And it doesn't mean that you're going to entertain the same situation again, or that you have to keep that in your life. But forgiveness is freedom for you.
That's a great freedom. I mean, I think you want to, the last thing we need, especially now, is to be held down by things. There's a lot like we talk about technology, perception, all these things can be tethers and hold us back from meeting our potential, right? Being present in the moment with the people who need us the most. And so I think there has to be, at least what I've learned is, there has to be some level of, if not self-forgiveness, acceptance. And allowing ourselves to, if not actively correct something, like if I can't correct a relationship, I can't fix it, at least being able to accept that now that I understand what's happening or what I've done, I need to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or I've learned enough from it so it drives my decisions in a positive way going forward.
Absolutely.
And, so I mean, for me, that would be my, if I had to do it over again, I would have I would have admitted to myself that I was high strung.
Yeah. It all goes back to self-awareness. That's what I love about our conversations. It's so good. So I thank you for this one today. This was so great. I love connecting with you on this level. And I always have fun when we talk. So last thing I will ask you, and we'll put your book and your blog in the show notes, but anything else, anywhere else that people can connect with you to, or give me the names of your blog and your and the book again.
Okay, so the name of the blog is Coach Russell's Timeout, and it's on the Adrenaline Solutions website. It's a consultancy group that helps sporting organizations, do better. So, like in terms of program development, program analysis, sports marketing, working with coaches, working with athletes. So
they look like they're up to some really cool stuff.
They are associated with the U.S. Center for Coaching Excellence. So that's sort of my niche with regards to that group. So along with that, they sort of carved out a niche on the website for me to have like these timeout moments where I can, post things that are sort of rattling in my brain. The book, it's called Winning Still. I guess, once we figure out the distribution arrangement with Amazon, I will be sure to share it with you. So hopefully you can share it with all your viewers and listeners.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much for this conversation today, Russ. And I know we'll connect soon. But it's been great to have you on What I Meant to Say.
Thank you. Anytime. Just let me know.
Okay, cool. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us for the What I Meant to Say podcast. For more real conversations like this one, come on over to the Be Better community at www.bebetterwithwendyjones.com, a place for athletes and parents to grow and find meaning behind what we do every day so that we can be strong on our own and better together.